There's a growing storm surrounding women's basketball, and the eye of it is Caitlin Clark. The league she joined, the one that should have embraced her as its greatest asset, has instead turned her into its most dangerous critic. And now, the same system that once sought to profit off her image might crumble under the weight of its own dysfunction. The Women's National Basketball Association is facing the greatest existential crisis in its history, not because of outside critics or lack of talent, but because of the way it handled its most marketable player. For decades, the league has operated in a kind of protected bubble, insulated from mainstream criticism, propped up by political rhetoric, and reliant on narratives that rarely challenged its internal issues. That illusion shattered the moment Caitlin Clark arrived. Before even stepping on a professional court, she was already a national sensation, smashing college records, filling arenas, and lighting up the screen with viewership numbers that the league had never dreamed of. She was supposed to be the future. Instead, she's become the catalyst for a reckoning. And nowhere was that more clear than in her rejection of a stunning offer from a new rival league, unrivaled. This wasn't just a lucrative deal. It was revolutionary. 8 to 10 weeks of play for over $1 million, more than 13 times her WNBA rookie salary. It also came with equity in the league, ownership, power, the kind of power the WNBA has never dared to offer any player, let alone someone so new. The assumption was obvious. Of course she would take it. Why wouldn't she? But that's where everything changed. Clark didn't take the offer. She walked away. And in doing so, she didn't lose power, she created it. That decision forced the sports world to stop and reevaluate everything. Suddenly, her name was no longer just tied to highlight reels and rookie accolades. It was tied to a narrative far deeper and more volatile. Something wasn't right. This wasn't about needing rest or focusing on her rookie season. This was a deliberate rejection of a system she knew was broken. And that break became undeniable when reports began surfacing about her treatment within the WNBA. In just her first season, Clark had already absorbed 6 flagrant fouls. She was getting hit, shoved, and knocked around with a consistency that went far beyond tough defense. Opponents like Kennedy Carter and Marina Mabrey delivered hits that resulted in missed games, 10 games to be exact, because of injuries that many believe were preventable if the league had done its job protecting her. Even rival players like Phoenix's Sophie Cunningham began calling it out publicly. But the league's silence was deafening. No real fines, no serious suspensions, just business as usual, while their top ratings magnet continued to take the brunt of it. That silence only strengthened the whispers of something darker. A culture that not only allowed but possibly encouraged a hostile environment toward the player keeping the league relevant. And then came the Olympic snub. By every statistical and commercial metric, Clark should have been on Team USA. But she wasn't. Instead, the final spot was reportedly handed to an aging legend as a send-off. Not because she outplayed Clark, but because Clark's presence was too big, too powerful, and too risky. Leaked reports suggested officials were terrified of the optics if Clark made the team but didn't get enough playing time. Rather than deal with the backlash, they kept her off the team altogether. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because she was too good. That wasn't about basketball. That was about politics and control. Her coach, Christy Sides, said Clark's response to the snub was chilling in its clarity. They woke a monster. And that monster has since shaken the foundation of the league to its core. Because the numbers don't lie. When Clark plays, the WNBA thrives. Average viewership soars to 1.8 million. Tickets sell out. Merchandise explodes. National media coverage floods in. But when Clark missed 10 games due to injury, viewership cratered, dropping by 55%. Suddenly, arenas were emptier. Headlines fewer. Ratings collapsed to just 847,000. That's not a dip. That's a death spiral. And it proved a brutal truth. This league isn't thriving because of the WNBA structure. It's surviving on Clark's back. One player is holding up the entire system, and that system has chosen to treat her like a threat rather than an asset, which is why her rejection of the unrivaled deal wasn't foolish. It was masterful. By walking away, she reframed the entire conversation. She wasn't chasing money, she was making a point. She was saying, "This system is broken, and I refuse to be complicit." And that message hit like a grenade, because it didn't just stay within sports circles. The story jumped into national discourse. A former White House staffer publicly called for a federal investigation into the WNBA, alleging that Clark was enduring a hostile work environment. What had previously been dismissed as rookie hazing was now being examined as systemic abuse. And with that came the real possibility of subpoenas, legal scrutiny, and public accountability that the league had never faced. But that was just one front. The second came from within. The WNBA Players Union saw its moment and seized it. For years, players had quietly pushed for better pay, better conditions, more respect. But locked into contracts until 2027, they had little leverage. Until Clark changed everything. Her rejection of the $1 million deal, her bruises, her snub from Team USA, it all became evidence in the union's case. Proof that even the league's brightest star wasn't protected, respected, or paid fairly. And with that, they made a bold move. They opted out of the collective bargaining agreement 3 years early. In one stroke, the financial structure of the league was thrown into chaos. Revenue sharing, salary caps, sponsorship deals, everything was now on the table. The players weren't asking anymore. They were demanding. And at the center of it all, the face of the league, the one the WNBA tried to silence, stood taller than ever. Caitlin Clark had gone from their golden ticket to their greatest liability. The league tried to use her for ratings while ignoring her needs. They tried to control her. But in rejecting the unrivaled offer, she flipped the script. She turned down a fortune to prove a point. That the fight wasn't about her. It was about everyone trapped inside the same broken system. Her move lit the match. The union threw on the fuel. And the federal scrutiny brought the heat. Now the WNBA is trapped between two infernos. On one side, investigations with the potential to expose corruption and abuse. On the other, a players' union ready to strike and demand a financial revolution. And in the middle stands Caitlin Clark, the very person they tried to minimize, now holding more influence than any executive, coach, or owner. The league's leadership is panicking. Do they give in? Do they change the system, admit their failure, and beg Clark to stay? Or do they dig in deeper, weaponize their media allies, and try to smear her as selfish, arrogant, and ungrateful? Every move is a risk. Every narrative is now under a microscope, and the public isn't buying spin anymore. The world is watching. The numbers are public. The stakes are real. Hollywood buzzing isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about power. It's about truth. And it's about what happens when the one person they tried to humble refuses to play their game. The WNBA wanted a savior. But in underestimating her, they may have created something far more dangerous, a reformer. Caitlin Clark didn't take the bait. She turned it into a weapon. And now that weapon is aimed directly at the system that tried to control her. The question isn't whether the WNBA can survive. The question is whether it can survive Caitlin Clark. Because the monster they woke isn't going back to sleep.